Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to continue our study on dividing polynomials using long division. And so this particular problem you see here is going to be a review of previous lessons. Now, one of the things that we need to remind ourselves from a previous lesson is the division algorithm. So remember, the division algorithm basically says this. If you are dividing two polynomials, and the degree of the numerator, so notice the degree of this polynomial is 3. So whenever you have a polynomial with just one variable, it's basically the um, the degree would be the largest exponent. So this degree here of this polynomial is 3, and for this polynomial the degree is 2. So the degree of the numerator is greater than or equal to the degree of the denominator, and it is 3 is greater than or equal to 2. Then according to the division algorithm, there are two things. One of them we saw was that whenever you're dividing two polynomials, you can get a quotient plus a remainder. And then you're going to write the remainder divided by the divisor. Okay, so the other thing we saw was that the dividend, so f of x here was the dividend, is going to equal the divisor times the quotient plus the remainder. So the division algorithm talked about two different ways to write um, the the expression. Okay, so basically, let's go ahead and quickly review dividing these two polynomials. Now, one of the things you're going to need, and this is in Canvas, is the steps to long division. So make sure you still have those steps. And so remember, the first step says that you have to make sure that your polynomials are in descending order. Now, the denominator is in descending order. You have x squared plus 2. The numerator is not in descending order because you should have x squared, then the x cubed, and then the x squared term should be next. So let's go ahead and rewrite this. And so when I rewrite this, that's going to be 3x cubed minus x squared plus x minus 2. And the denominator will be x squared plus 2. All right. Now, the next thing you're going to do is you're gonna rewrite this in long division form. So you're going to the denominator is called your divisor, so that's going to be listed first. And also, I forgot to mention, also is that if there's any missing terms, you need to put that term as a 0 term. And so notice that I'm missing in the divisor, I'm missing the x term. So we're going to write it as x squared plus 0x plus 2 divided into, and in the numerator, it doesn't look, I'm not missing any terms. I have an x cubed, I have an x squared, I have an x, and I have my constant. So I'm going to get 3x cubed minus x squared plus x minus 2. So in this case, it looked like the only missing term was that x term, and so you have to write it as 0 times x. Okay, and so basically, you just follow the steps. And so when doing long division, you ask yourself, how many times will x squared go into 3x cubed? And so basically, you're going to take the first term here, 3x cubed, and divided by the first term here, which is x squared. Now be careful, we keep talking about the first term, but we mention the first term because we've put it in descending order. So it's always, when we say the first term, the first term should always be the one with the largest exponent. Okay? So largest exponent, largest exponent. Make sure it's in descending order. That's important. So 3x squared divided by 3x cubed rather divided by x squared, that's going to give me 3x. And so make sure when you rewrite it, you put the 3x aligned with the x terms. Okay, so now x squared, just remember x squared times 3x. So if you do this, x squared times 3x will give you 3x cubed, and so that's what you're doing here. Okay, now you're going to multiply. Now remember, when you multiply, if you're doing this correctly, if this is correct, when you multiply this times your divisor, that first thing you write here better be the same as that first term in your dividend. All right, so 3x times x squared. And again, just like we've talked before, you may want to, if you have trouble doing this mentally, you may want to write it down. So you're taking 3x and you multiply by your divisor. So you're saying 3x times x squared plus 0x plus 2. All right, and you can distribute. Now, so 3x times x squared is 3x cubed. So that goes here. And so remember, we just said this better be the same as this, and it is. And then 3x times 0x, so 3 times 0 is 0, and then x times x is x squared. So 3x times 0x is 0x squared. So we can put that here, plus 0x squared. And then 3x times 2, 3x times 2 is 6x. Okay? Now remember, the next thing you do is you subtract. So you got to subtract this. And so just like we've mentioned before in previous lessons, you may want to, and I'm trying to find a red pen, so you may want to rewrite this expression by taking the opposite. Because what happens is that some students, when they look at this, they want to write 7x here. And so that's not really 7x, because what's happening is you're taking each of these terms here and subtracting from it these terms. So 3x cubed minus 3x cubed, that's easy. You're not going to have an issue with that one. That's 0, and that always has to be true. So when you do that, just like we did in previous lessons, remember, every time you do this, just like in previous lessons, these should always be zeros. Okay, so just go back to the lessons that dealt with this. And then the issue becomes this. So negative x squared minus 0x squared, and then x minus 6x. All right, so what you may want to do is, if you're having trouble doing this mentally, you may want to rewrite right here. You may want to rewrite this expression, its equivalent. So the opposite of 3x cubed is a negative 3x cubed. The opposite of 0x is still 0x squared. And the opposite of 6x is a negative 6x. All right, so you may want to do that. You may want to rewrite it like that. And now you'll see 3x squared minus 3x squared is the same thing as saying 3x squared plus a negative 3x squared, which is 0. A negative x squared minus 0x squared is the same thing as saying negative x squared plus 0x squared, which is negative x squared. And then a positive x subtract 6x is the same thing as saying x and a negative 6x, which is a negative 5x. All right. Now, before we go on, just remember what we said. So if you need to rewrite it like this, you rewrite it like this. Some students will just say this. For example, this right here, they'll say, well, that's x minus 6x, which becomes x minus 6x, which is negative 5x. I mean, you can write it out like that rather than writing it out like this right here. Okay, it's whatever you feel more comfortable with, but many students will do it this way. Now, the next thing you do is you bring down your next term. And then you do the process all over again. So you take the first term here, right here, and let me go ahead and put it right here. So you take the first term, which is negative x squared, and you divide it by the first term here, x squared. All right, and so negative x squared divided by x squared is just a negative 1. And so that goes here. Then you multiply. So negative 1 times x squared is a negative x squared. So remember, if you're doing this correctly, if these are correct, if you did this correct, then when you multiply, negative 1 times x squared better be the same as this one right here. And it is, just like it was here. Okay? And then negative 1 times 0x is 0x. And then negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2. Now remember, the next thing you're going to do is subtract. Okay, you're going to subtract. And remember, that's where students have trouble, is doing this mentally, when they have to think about this mentally. So what you may want to do is to rewrite this expression right below it. So write its equivalent expression right below it. So the opposite of negative x squared is a positive x squared. The opposite of 0x is still 0x. The opposite of a negative 2 is a positive 2. Okay? And so now we have this. We have negative x squared minus a negative x squared. So if you got to rewrite it, just down here, you do the same thing. It does not matter. This is probably better to deal with right here, but it's up to you. So we have negative x squared minus a negative x squared. Now remember what that means. That means negative x squared plus x squared, which we know is 0. And so if you're doing this correctly, remember it cancels out, you get 0. You get 0 right here. A negative 5x subtract 0x means the same thing as negative 5x plus 0x, which is a negative 5x. A negative 2 subtract a negative 2 means the same thing as negative 2 plus 2, which is 0. So all you get is negative 5x. There's no other term to bring down, so that should be your remainder. Now, just want to remind you about some things that we've talked about in previous lessons. Look at this expression right here, this polynomial. What is the degree of this polynomial? What is the degree? The degree is 1. That's your exponent, 1 right here, x to the first. What is the degree of your divisor? Well, the degree of the divisor is 2, the largest exponent. So since the degree, I'm going to write it out, since the degree of the remainder is less than the degree of the divisor, you are done. Okay, you are done. So when we this right here, when we got to this point, notice the degree here was 2. That was not less than that. They were equal, so you had to keep on going. And so that's why you're always told, just keep dividing until you get to that last term. There's no other term to bring down, so that should be it. That should be it. Just verify. The degree here is 1, the degree here is 2, you're done. All right. Now, remember how we wrote this. So far, this is how you wrote it. You said the answer, and then I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the problem. So let me show you. So this right here. So you have 3x cubed minus x squared plus x minus 2 divided by x squared plus 2 is going to equal the quotient, which is 3x minus 1, plus the remainder, which is negative 5x, divided by the divisor. Now don't use the 0 term. You use the actual polynomial that you started out with. So it's x squared plus 2. Okay, now I just want to remind you, see how this is a monomial and it's negative, the coefficient's negative? So if you wanted to, you could have rewritten this as 3x minus 1 minus 5x divided by x squared plus 2. So you could have written it, instead of saying plus a negative 5x, you could have just said subtract 5x divided by x squared plus 2. Okay? Now, sometimes, now remember the division algorithm? So we wrote this answer, we wrote our answer using this idea right here. Okay? Sometimes, though, you may be asked to write it like this, where you have the dividend equals the divisor times the quotient plus the remainder. And so that's going to be the next set of directions. So look at these directions right here. And so these directions, see this right here, oops, sorry, this right here is this part of our division algorithm. So we're going to write it like this instead of like this. So always read the directions though. So here's the direction. So it says a polynomial p of x and a divisor d of x are given. So in other words, look at number 1. Number 1, you're told p of x will equal, and let's say p of x, let me find my sheet. Let's say p of x is, all right, let's say p of x is this. It's 42 x squared minus 33, and d of x is 7x plus 7. All right, so p of x is this right here, and d of x, which is your divisor, is this one. All right, now p of x would be your numerator. So you see right here. So it says use long division to find the quotient q of x and the remainder r of x when p of x is divided by d of x. So in other words, find, so you're told p of x is being divided by d of x, right? And then you know p of x is this, 42x squared minus 33 divided by 7x plus 7. And then notice the degree of the numerator is 2, the degree of the denominator is 1, so therefore you are going to get a quotient and you will get a remainder. Now sometimes the remainder will be 0, but you will get a quotient and a remainder. Okay? All right, now let's go ahead and do long division. So notice the denominators is in descending order, and there's no missing terms. So we're going to go ahead and write it as 7x plus 7 divided into. Now the numerator is in descending order, but there's an x term that's missing. So we're going to write it as 42x squared plus 0x minus 33. Okay? Now, here's the difference between the one we just did and this one. So the direction says, so remember the one we just did, we wrote the answer like we did in previous lessons. We wrote it as a quotient plus the remainder divided by the divisor. What they want you to do here, though, is to write it in that other form where you have your dividend is equal to the divisor times the quotient plus the remainder. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and do long division. So we're going to take now remember it's already in descending order, so the largest term here is listed first and the largest term here is listed first. All right, so it's already in descending order. So you take the first term here, divide by the first term here. So 7x will go into 42x squared. It looks like 42 divided by 7 is what, 6? And then x squared divided by x is x, so go 6x times. So let's put the 6x here onto the x. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because 6x times 7x is 42x squared. So remember the next step is to take the term you just wrote up here and multiply by your divisor. Every term of your divisor, there's only two terms here. So 6x times 7x is 42x squared. Now remember, if you're doing this correctly, those two have to be exactly the same. Okay? 6x times 7 is 42x. So we're going to put that here. All right, now remember the next step you do is you're going to subtract. Now remember, we said these two have to be exactly the same because when you subtract, you're now going to get 0 right here. That's going to be 0. Now we don't write 0, but in your mind you know that's a 0. Now remember, that's where some students have a little trouble when they're subtracting in parentheses a bunch of terms here. So if you have to, you use a different color pen and you put the equivalent expression here. So the opposite of 42x squared is a negative 42x squared. The opposite of 42x is a negative 42x. Okay? And so now we have 42x squared subtract 42x squared means the same thing as 42x squared and a negative 42x squared, which is 0. 0x subtract 42x means the same thing as 0x and a negative 42x, which is a negative 42x. And now we bring down the next term. And then we do the division all over again. You keep on going. Remember, you keep on going until the degree of the remainder is less than the degree of the divisor. Okay? So the degree here is 1. The degree of this polynomial is 1. The largest exponent you see is 1. The degree here of the divisor is 1. This is not less than the degree here. So you keep on going. So you got to do this process all over again. So negative 42x divided by 7x. So negative 42 divided by negative 42x divided by 7x is going to be a negative 6. Okay, because x divided by x is 1. So that goes here. And then you multiply. Negative 6 times 7x. Remember, what you're doing is this. You're taking this right here, and if you have to write it, you write it, times the divisor. Okay? And then you distribute. So when I distribute, I get negative 6 times 7x is a negative 42x, and a negative 6 times 7 is a negative 42. And so that's going to go here. So negative 42x. Remember, if you're doing this correctly, just like we did here, these two have to be the same. See, they're the same. If these are correct, then that's always going to be true. Okay? And so and don't forget negative 42 right here. So if you can do it mentally, you do it mentally. Negative 6 times 7x, negative 42x. Negative 6 times 7 is a negative 42. If you do, okay, now remember the next step is to subtract that. Now be careful. So you see how it's getting a little bit more complicated right here because then you're asking yourself, all right, I have a negative 42x, but then I'm subtracting a negative 42x. Some students still have a little trouble with that idea. So if you need to write it out, you write it out. You do it like this if you need to. Negative 42x, subtract a negative 42x. And then, so remember when you subtract a negative, that's the same thing as adding the opposite. So that's negative 42x plus 42x, which we know is 0. You could also do this right here. Just rewrite in red, just like I did here, rewrite in red the equivalent expression. So the opposite of a negative 42x is a positive 42x. The opposite of a negative 42 is a positive 42. All right, and so now we have negative 42x subtract a negative 42x, just like we wrote here, means the same thing as negative 42x and a positive 42x. So that's 0. So see how just like this. Now a negative 33 subtract a negative 42 means the same thing as negative 33 plus 42. All right, and negative 33 plus 42 is a positive 9. Now remember, this is a constant. The degree of a constant is 0, and 0 is less than the degree here, which is 1. So we're done. There's no other term to bring down. You are done. Okay, so now they want the answer though to look like this. So you got to read the directions. Direction says write the answer like this. So your dividend p of x, your numerator, which is this right here. So you're going to say 42x squared minus 33 will equal the divisor, which is this, in parentheses 7x plus 7, times the quotient, which we just found, which is 6x minus 6, plus the remainder, which we just found, which is 9. And that's what they wanted you to write. That's the answer. Okay, that's the answer. So the dividend equals the divisor times the quotient plus the remainder. Now, since that's not too difficult to multiply, let's go ahead and check to make sure that this is true. All right, so remember, you could have made an error somewhere around here. So if you make an error somewhere around here, then obviously your quotient is going to be wrong and your remainder will be wrong as well. So let's go ahead and check this. So remember, we checked this in previous lessons. So let's just check this. Let's see if that's true. So we're going to go ahead and check. We're going to go ahead and check to see if this is true. So is 42x squared minus 33 going to equal 7x plus 7 times 6x minus 6 plus 9? All right. Now notice that these are two binomials. So I can use a fall method here. So 7x times 6x is 42x squared. The outer, right here, 7x times a negative 6 is a negative 42x. The inner, 7x times 6x is a positive 42x. And then the last, 7 times a negative 6 is a negative 42, and then plus 9. Combining like terms, I get 42x squared. A negative 42x and a positive 42x, that's 0. So you don't have an x term, right? And then negative 42 plus 9 is a negative 33. And that's the same thing. So what we have is correct. So all this work was done correctly. Okay? All right, so that's number 1. And let's look at number 2. So number 2, let's do the same thing, same directions. So number 2, you have p of x is equal to, and let's say it is 8m cubed minus 57m squared plus 42. And d of x is, let's say, 8m plus 7. All right, so 8m plus 7. Okay, so then we have so basically what you're doing is you want to find p of x divided by d of x in the directions. And so your dividend is going to be the numerator, so that's 8m cubed minus 57m squared plus 42 divided by your divisor, which is 8m plus 7. Now they're both in descending order, but if you notice the dividend, the numerator, is missing that m term. So I'm gonna have to, when I rewrite this in long division, I'm gonna have to put that missing term here. So I get 8m plus 7, and then this becomes 8m cubed minus 57m squared. case you're missing the m term, so you got to put the 0 term there. That's your placeholder, plus 0m, and then plus 42. So that's important to have those placeholders in there. That's important. It helps with your thought processes. It makes things aligned. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the division. So 8m will go into 8m cubed how many times? So basically you're saying 8m cubed divided by 8m. So you take the first term here, divide by the first term there. Now remember, the reason why we're doing first divided by first is because it's already in descending order. So basically you're taking the largest term here, the largest exponent, the term with the largest exponent, dividing it by the term of the largest exponent here. So first divided by first. That's why we always say put in descending order. And so when I divide that, 8 divided by 8 is 1. M cubed divided by m is m squared. I'm going to put the m squared over m squared right here. And then we multiply. So m squared times 8m, if you got to write it out, to think about it, m squared times your divisor, you do that. Okay, no problem with that. You got to do that. And then distribute, you get m squared times 8m, which is 8m cubed. And remember, if you're doing this correctly, if this is done correctly, if this is correct, then when you multiply, these two have to be the same. They have to be the same. And then m cubed times 7 is, m squared times 7 is 7m squared. Okay? And so that goes here. So plus 7m squared. Now remember though, the next thing you got to do is subtract. And so when I subtract this, that's not difficult because you can see that 8m cubed minus 8m cubed is 0, right? Now here, some of you may have an issue. So what you may want to do is write out the equivalent expression here. So the opposite of 8m cubed is a negative 8m cubed. The opposite of 7m squared is a negative 7m squared. All right? And so negative 8m cubed minus 8m cubed is the same thing as saying 8m cubed plus a negative 8m cubed, which is 0. Negative 57m squared subtract 7m squared is the same thing as saying negative 57m squared and a negative 7m squared, which is a negative 64m squared. Okay? Then we bring down the next term. We keep on going, right? Because remember, we stop whenever the degree, whenever we do the subtraction and we're left with a degree that's less than the degree of the divisor. So the degree of the divisor is 1, this degree is 2. So we got to keep on going. That's why you see we got to keep bringing these down. Okay, now we do this all over again, the division all over again. So now I have negative 64m squared, negative 64m squared being divided by 8m. And so negative 64 divided by 8 is a negative 8. M squared divided by m is m. So that goes here, minus 8m. And then you're going to multiply what you just put here, that term, times your divisor. So negative 8m times 8m is a negative 64m squared, which is what you're supposed to have, right? Because that's what this is. So you wrote it down correctly whenever these two are the same, just like it was here. Negative 8m times 7. Negative 8m times 7 is a negative 56m. Negative 56m. Okay? Now we're going to subtract. Now be careful when you subtract. So if you need to write out the equivalent expression right here, then do that. The opposite of negative 64m squared is a positive 64m squared. The opposite of a negative 56m is a positive 56m. Okay? Do that if you have to. Nothing wrong with that. Negative 64m squared subtract the negative 64m squared means the same thing as negative 64m squared and a positive 64m squared, which is 0. So that's also supposed to cancel out. 0m subtract a negative 56m means the same thing as 0m plus 56m, which is 56m. I got to keep on going because the degree here is 1, the degree here is 1. You stop whenever the degree is less. So that's why you got to bring down the next one. And you do the division all over again. So now I'm going to take 56m divided by 8m. So 56m divided by 8m is going to give me, what's that, 7m? I'm sorry, 7, right? Just 7, correct? Because the m divided by m is 1. All right? And so And so this becomes plus 7 right here. And so now we multiply. 7 times 8m is 56m. 7 times 7 is 49. Okay? And then you subtract. Now remember, if you're doing this correctly, if this was written correctly, then these two have to be the same. Okay? Those two have to be the same. All right, now 56m minus 56m, that's 0. 42 minus 49, that's a negative 7. Now remember, if you need to rewrite it like you did here, that's fine. The opposite of negative 56m is the opposite of a positive 56m is a negative 56m. The opposite of a positive 49 is a negative 49. All right, and now you see that 56 and negative 56 is 0. 42 and a negative 49 is a negative 7. And notice that you have a constant here, so the degree of a constant is 0, and 0 is less than the degree here, and the degree here is 1. So you're done. There's nothing else to bring down, right? So now let's write the answer in the form that they want the answer written in. And remember what that form is. It's got to look like this. They want you to use this instead. They want it to look like this. So your answer, you're going to say this. So the answer, you're going to say, all right, you're going to say your dividend, which is this. So 8m cubed minus 57m squared plus 42 is going to equal the divisor. Okay, remember your divisor is this. D of x, your divisor. So 8m plus 7 times the quotient, which is this now, okay, this trinomial, that's your quotient. So m squared minus 8m plus 7 plus the remainder, which is negative 7. Okay, now just to remind you, could have also written, see where it says plus the negative 7, you could have also done this. 8m plus 7 times m squared minus 8m plus 7 minus 7. Okay, does not matter. Plus a negative 7, adding a negative 7 means the same thing as subtracting 7. Okay, all right, so that was number 2. And let's just do one more. So let's look at number 3. So number 3, we have this. Okay, number 3. All right, so let's say number 3, we had this problem. So we have p of x is 2n cubed plus 21n squared plus 25n, and d of x is 2n plus 3. All right, and so you want to find p of x divided by d of x. So your numerator, p of x, is going to be 2n cubed plus 21n squared plus 25n. Your denominator is going to be 2n plus 3. Now remember, it's already in descending order in both cases. You are missing, though, a term. You're missing the constant term here, so you have to put 0 in your term. Okay, so and so when I do this by long division, I get 2n plus 3, and over here I get 2n cubed plus 21n squared plus 25n plus 0. Now, I'm just going to say this, though. Since that was just a constant that was missing, then putting that 0 is not going to matter because it's the very last one. But to be on the safe side, go ahead and put that missing term. Whenever you have any missing term, whether it's a variable term or a constant, put in that 0. All right. Okay, now let's do the long division. So remember, it's in descending order, so the largest term here is this, the largest term here is this, the largest degree term, the largest degree term. So 2n cubed divided by 2n. So 2n cubed divided by 2n will give us n squared. So that means that 2n will go into 2n cubed n squared times. And we know that's true because if I multiply that by the divisor, what I put here would be the same thing as 2n cubed. And it is, because look, n squared times 2n is 2n cubed. N squared times 3 is 3n squared. Okay, now we're going to subtract. Now again, you may want to, in red, put its equivalent expression here. So the opposite of 2n cubed is a negative 2n cubed. The opposite of 3n squared is a negative 3n squared. All right, so if that helps you, then you do that. So 2n cubed minus 2n cubed, that's going to be 0. Remember, that's always going to be the case. And 21n squared minus 3n squared means the same thing as 21n squared and a negative 3n squared. So that's going to be, what's that, 18n squared? Okay, now we're in on the next term, plus 25n. Now remember, you see the degree here is 2, the degree here is 1, so I got to keep dividing. So 18n squared divided by 2n. And so 18n squared divided by 2n, 18 divided by 2 is 9, n squared divided by n's n. So that means that 2n will go into 18n squared 9n times. So I'm going to put 9n right here. See, I'm aligning my like terms. Then we multiply. Now, if this is correct, that means, if this is correct, that means I better have a 18n squared right here, because that's an 18n squared. So 9n times 2n is 18n squared. 9n times 3 is 27n. Okay, and now I subtract. And so when I subtract, notice I'm going to go ahead and just write out in red. So that's going to be the opposite of 18n squared is a negative 18n squared. The opposite of 27n is a negative 27n. All right. Now, so 18n squared minus 18n squared, that's 0. Or you could have said 18n squared and a negative 18n squared. 25n subtract 27n means the same thing as 25n and a negative 27n, which is a negative 2n. Okay? Now, here's the thing that will confuse some people. So if you didn't put that 0 there, you would have said, well, there's nothing to be done, so I'm done, right? Well, not quite, because remember, what's the degree here? The degree is 1. What's the degree here? The degree is 1. So you have to keep dividing. So that's why, even though you don't have a constant term, it's always a very good idea to put the 0, so that way you know you still have to bring something down. Okay, so remember, you got to keep on going, because the degree here is not less than the degree here. They're equal. All right, so we keep on going. All right, so now we take negative 2n divided by 2n. So negative 2n divided by 2n is a negative 1. So it goes here. And now we multiply. So negative 1 times 2n is a negative 2n. A negative 1 times 3 is a negative 3. And then I subtract. Now again, it's a very good idea to actually, in red or whatever color, just write out its equivalent expression. So the opposite of a negative 2n is a positive 2n. The opposite of a negative 3 is a positive 3. All right, and so negative 2n and a positive 2n, that's 0. Remember, it's always supposed to cancel out like that. 0 subtract a negative 3 means the same thing as 0 plus 3, which is 3. You see, there's nothing to bring down anymore, right? And notice the degree here is 0. The degree of a constant is 0. The degree of the divisor is 1. 0 is less than 1, so you're done. You just have to write the answer the way they want you to, and that's the way they want you to write the answer. So you're going to say the dividend. So my dividend here, this is your dividend, this is your divisor, this is your quotient, and this is your remainder. Okay, so you're going to say the divisor, the dividend, which is 2n cubed plus 21n squared plus 25n is going to be the divisor, which is 2n plus 3 in parentheses, times the quotient, which is this trinomial, n squared plus 9n minus 1 plus the remainder. And you're done. That's the answer. Okay, and that's all you do. Now, if you want to check this, and again, it's always a good idea to check this if you have time. So you want to see if this and this are equal. But be careful. Remember, in the previous problem, we were able to use the FOIL method here because I had a binomial times a binomial. Here, though, I can't use a FOIL method. So you got to remember, you have to use the distributive property. So you're going to take each term here, multiply by this trinomial. So if you want to check it, you're going to say 2n times n squared is 2n cubed. 2n times 9n, see I'm covering this term here so you don't see it. So 2n times 9n is 18n squared. 2n times a negative 1 is a negative 2n. Now let's go to the next one. 3 times n squared is 3n squared. 3 times 9n is 27n. 3 times negative 3 is negative 3, and then plus 3. Combining like terms, I get 2n cubed. 18n squared and 3n squared is 21n squared. So far I'm good, right? So I have it so far. Negative 2n and a positive 27n is a positive 25n, which is what I wanted. And then these constants add up to be 0. So that's it. So what I have is correct. All right. So pretty easy to check, right? And so that takes care of the dividing polynomials along division using these directions. So just read the directions very carefully to see how you need to write the answer. So that's the end of this lesson.